Good evening and welcome to Transition Talks Tuesday. My name is Tim Markle. I'm director of the Southern Regional Center for Children and Youth with Special Healthcare Needs. Hot off the presses, in about a month, we're probably going to be known as the Children's Resource Center South. But don't tell anyone because the website's not ready. Shh. It'll just be between me, you, and anybody else that's on here tonight. Tonight, I am excited to welcome in Aging and Disability Resource Specialist Jim and Quinn, who I've known for years now. Liz is with us from Sauk Prairie. And so thank you so much for being here. Go ahead, if you'd like to introduce yourself. I will go ahead and start sharing the screen for your presentation.
Well, my name is Jim Pritzkow. I am a social worker and information assistance specialist with the Aging and Disability Resource Center of Sauk County.
And I'm Quinn Hause. I am also a social worker, more specifically a disability benefits specialist for the Aging and Disability Resource Center of Sauk County.
Okay, so tonight we're going to start with kind of going over what our mission is. And I do want to point out that there is an Aging and Disability Resource Center in every county in the state of Wisconsin. We just happen to be working at the Sauk one, but if you are interested in getting information from different ADRCs, you do have one local in your county. We'll go on to the next slide. So this is our mission, and I'm going to read this word for word. The Aging and Disability Resource Center of Sauk County is dedicated to working with adults and families who are affected by aging, disability, mental health, or substance abuse issues, by providing information and access to services to enhance their quality of life. At the ADRC, you can expect to get unbiased information on just about anything from in-home services to transportation, to home-delivered meals, to whatever somebody would need to maintain their independence in their home. So that's kind of my job in a nutshell, is to work with families, work with individuals to make sure that their needs and their care needs are met in the community. So specifically on the next slide, we're going to be talking tonight about transition. Transition starts at the age 17 years, 6 months. So an ADRC can start working with an individual at that time. One of the biggest takeaways for tonight is that we just remember that 17 years, 6 months. It's important that families and young adults are referred to the Aging and Disability Resource Center at that time so that we can do our job in getting that student or that individual ready to transition from the children's world of services to the adult world. So in transition, we talk about long-term care programs, integrated employment, legal decision-making, and things like that. So tonight we're going to focus on 3 specific areas of transition that the ADRCs mostly focus on. But part of transition, it's a very big word. It means a lot of different things. So, but tonight we're going to focus on 3 specific areas. So on the next slide, just to kind of an overview of the Aging and Disability Resource Center. It is a single point of contact for information and assistance on issues affecting people with disabilities, regardless of income. I personally have worked with people who have millions of dollars. Income doesn't matter. ADRC services are here for everybody over the age of 17 years, 6 months. The ADRC is a place to call for students, parents, and teachers with disability questions related to adulthood. Oftentimes, we do pair with our school systems or school districts to offer presentations at parent nights, do outreach activities, and things like that with the school. So Quinn and I are in the schools quite often. We also provide accurate, unbiased information related to living and working with a disability. So again, our information is unbiased. We are, at all ADRCs, our county government agencies. Therefore, we have no interest in what provider you pick. We don't try to sell you anything, and all of our information is unbiased. So when you're working with an ADRC and you ask, what do you think is the best for me? A lot of times we have that canned answer where we say, we're unbiased this is a decision that you need to make, and let's bring in some other people that can help you make that decision if you do need assistance. And the other thing that's important in our last bullet point is that services can be provided at the home, in the office, IEP meetings, telephone, through a home visit, or tonight, Zoom. So COVID has really made us proficient with Zoom, and that wasn't an option back years ago when we did these slides. But essentially the ADRC can be wherever you are. Our best practice is to work with people in their homes, but sometimes that's not always the best option for a lot of different reasons. So therefore, we are flexible. I've been in IEPs, I've been in homes, I've had people walk through the ADRC and meet there. It really doesn't matter. It's whatever is best for that person. Okay, so going on to the next slide, we're going to kind of now zero in on transition. If you know the guy with the thumbs up, that kind of dates you. So, but that's the Fonz, and he was popular back in, I believe it was the 70s from the show Happy Days. So again, if you know who that is, we got something in common there. So we'll go on to the next slide. That was just kind of a little filler there. But when we talk about transition isn't just about certain people. Transition can really encompass everybody that's in that young adult's life. And here is just not an all-inclusive list, but obviously parents, teachers, that person, and everybody kind of comes together to work on that young adult's behalf to make sure that, again, we get a nice smooth transition from the children's world of services to the adult world of services. And I do want to point out that sometimes we work with young adults who have not had any experience or have any, been working with any type of county agency. And that's okay, because we can, work with people when they turn 18, before they turn 18, 17, 6. So just because somebody's not receiving any children's services doesn't mean that we don't talk about transition, because as we move a little forward here, you're going to see that these are things that anybody, around the age of 18 might need to consider. So we'll move on. So this next slide is just kind of a little roadmap. And it kind of shows, kind of the progression of things. So, really when we look at this, we talk about people in our lives that help us kind of determine what we want, what our goals are, at the later part of high school, going in and graduating high school, and then turning into what you want to do for your life. So again, one of the biggest takeaways from tonight is that 17 years, 6 months, that little package is, that is one of the most important takeaways from tonight, is that we can work, and we do want to start working with young adults at that 17 years, 6 months. Some of the things that we help with are Social Security, and making referrals to DVR, which stands for the Division of Vocational Rehab. Their primary role is to help procure and support people with disabilities in the workforce. So they are available. We will make referrals back and forth between our two agencies. But then we also talk about education after high school, talking about independent living, getting a job, all those kind of things that as we age and as we turn into young adults, those things that we try to do. Okay, so we'll move on to the next page. So some important things that happen at age 18. First of all, we resolve the issue of guardianship and other alternatives, which we're going to talk about tonight. We call that legal decision-making. We make sure that young adults understand their rights. Rights look very different as a child versus an adult. So we try to explain the difference between what that all entails. We also look at applying for Social Security disability, if appropriate. So we will talk about that tonight. And then also getting personalized information directly from the Aging and Disability Resource Center. The great thing about working with an ADRC is you're working with a person at the ADRC. Nobody is cookie cutter, and neither are our services or our conversations. So our services are really custom tailored to that young adult and the goals that that young adult has. So that's kind of some of the things that we, kind of look at. But even to zero in a little bit more on the next slide, this is going to be kind of our topic of conversation tonight. These are whenever I get a referral for a young adult who is wanting to find out about transition and talking with their parents, we always focus on 3 specific areas: legal decision-making, Social Security disability, and then the long-term care programs. So that's going to kind of be the meat of our conversation tonight, are these three areas. So in moving forward, the first thing that we're going to talk about is guardianship. So guardianship is the most restrictive way of making sure that people have somebody or a decision maker put into their life. So with guardianship does involve a court process. Sometimes the children's unit in our county, for example, will petition the court. Sometimes Adult Protective Services will petition the court. But if a child is in need of a guardian, that does involve a court proceeding. In that proceeding, the judge will rule whether or not that person meets the legal definition of incapacity, meaning that they can't make their own decisions. And then the judge, I'm back. There we go. And then what we have when the judge makes that decision is that the judge can order a guardian of person or guardian of estate. Guardian of person oversees that person's health care, oversees the person, and helps make decisions for that person based on their health care needs. Guardian of estate looks at all the financial decisions that that person would need to make. So again, guardianship is the most restrictive type of legal decision making. Now, not everybody that has ability needs a guardian. And as I said, guardian is most restrictive. So going down on this slide to some of the other alternatives, we kind of listed these from most restrictive to least restrictive. So let's say the young adult doesn't need guardianship. They're doing pretty well. They can make some decisions on their own. The first type of alternative is called a conservatorship. And that's where that young adult could ask the court to appoint somebody to make decisions about their finances. So it's kind of like a guardianship that doesn't have a finding of incapacity, but yet the judge is saying, I'm going to appoint this person to make decisions on your behalf for your finances. Conservatorship isn't done a whole lot. So, but it does have its place and it does work great for some people. Another kind of going down this list here, a representative payee is somebody who Social Security appoints to manage a person's finances for them. So when that young adult or that person starts receiving Social Security, they can have somebody appointed to kind of oversee that money. And that's called a representative payee. So that representative payee would be responsible at sometimes for paying rent, paying utilities, making sure that that person has some spending money to meet their needs. But really, that representative payee kind of oversees finances for somebody. Nice thing about that, doesn't have to go to court. It just is run right through Social Security. There's no finding of incapacity. It's just somebody that is appointed by Social Security to manage money. And I think Quinn will get into that a little bit later as well. The next bullet point is supported decision-making. Supported decision-making is a new thing. It's kind of a nice middle ground between nobody appointed to make decisions and guardianship. So what supported decision-making is basically giving somebody in your life the ability to be in the room with you while you're making decisions about certain things. For example, a young adult could say, you know what, I can make decisions for myself, but I really feel strongly that I want my parent involved with that decision. And what that does is that kind of cuts the red tape of releases and all that kind of thing to have that parent available when those decisions are being made. It is a legal document. And it is really very simple to use. And just because you have one of these other things in place doesn't mean you can't have a supported decision-making tool also. So again, a really nice middle ground for legal decision-making. The young adult still makes their own decision, but it gives other people the authority to be in the room with that person while they're doing it. And then the next bullet point here is power of attorney for health and finance. Anybody over the age of 18 should have a power of attorney for health and finance completed, especially a power of attorney for health care. In Wisconsin, if somebody, let's say you have a husband and wife, and the husband is in a car accident, his wife wouldn't be necessarily legally able to make decisions about the care that her husband receives. If he's unable to make decisions for himself. So everybody over the age of 18 should have a power of attorney for healthcare. There is one for finance as well, but as a general rule of thumb, everybody should have a power of attorney for healthcare. And then the last one here is dual signature accounts. And that's really what we look at as far as banking goes. So that having somebody else on the account with the young adult to help them with their finances, maybe being able to write out checks and cash checks and withdraw money and things like that, just having somebody else on that account that can work with that person. So that's what we have as far as legal decision-making goes. Now I'm going to turn it over to Quinn, and she's going to talk about Social Security.
So this first slide is about medical assistance, because many times when young adults come to me or a referral is made to me from Jim, a lot of families have questions about health insurance. So when I help someone apply for disability, typically it cannot be before the age of 18 years, 1 month. So it's the month after the individual turns 18 that we can apply for disability typically. However, there's lots of questions about insurance. And so I explained that if we're applying for disability, it can take quite some time for a decision to be made, but we can contact the Capital Consortium in Sauk County to discuss Medicaid, also known as Title 19, Forward Health, the Forward Card, Badger Care. So those are all different forms of Medicaid, and I can help families understand those differences and how to apply. But basically, Medicaid covers doctor services, prescription medications, non-emergency transportation to and from doctor appointments, for example, hospital stays. Sometimes there's other medical needs, referrals are made, and also sometimes personal care assistance, depending on someone's need. Again, I just bring up medical assistance because it is a question that we get quite frequently with young adults. Many times they're on parents' insurance, and now typically they can be on a parent's insurance until the age of 26. But at one point, that wasn't the case. There are some individuals who are on Katie Beckett Medicaid till the age of 19. But if we're still waiting for Social Security to make a disability determination, we can talk about ways to look for insurance through Medicaid. Also, the bullet point below states that students receiving disability benefits, such as Social Security disability insurance or Supplemental Security Income, need to contact Social Security and reapply as an adult before the age of 18. I'm not going to go into great detail because there are so many different scenarios. And like Jim had said, there's no cookie cutter way of dealing with this. When I get a referral, I ask a lot of questions. Everyone is different, and we then talk about what would work best for that individual. But I do have a lot of referrals made to me where maybe the child has already been deemed disabled by Social Security as a minor child and is already receiving benefits on their own record through SSI, for example, or maybe they're drawing off of a parent who is already disabled. So I have to ask a lot of different questions. But if an individual has been deemed disabled by Social Security as a minor child, then we do need to make sure that Social Security is aware that paperwork needs to be sent to be filled out, because the children's disability is much different than the adult disability world. And so there is redetermination paperwork that has to be done. We usually contact Social Security prior to the age of 18, and Social Security has until the age of 19 to complete that age 18 redetermination. And I can help families with that paperwork if need be. And then the next slide really talks about Social Security disability and SSI, which is Supplemental Security Income. And when people hear, they talk about disability, and many times they don't know that there is a difference. So we also discuss the differences, because SSDI, known as Social Security Disability Insurance, is based on work credits and work history. Many times when I'm working with young adults who are just turning 18, they don't have a lot of work history. That is to be expected. They've been in school. They're maybe just getting connected with DVR, the Division of Vocational Rehab, and they haven't done any job development or interns, anything like that. So I still explain, though, the differences, because SSDI is based on work credits. And so not only do I work with people who are 18 and over, but clearly sometimes I'm working with families as well, and maybe they're disabled and receiving SSDI. And so there are different rules with Social Security Administration. If a parent has already been deemed disabled and is on SSDI, there's a separate application that needs to be done for that young adult, because they are considered a disabled adult child, a DAC, and they draw off their parents' Social Security disability record. So again, I'm just pointing that out because there is a difference, and there are a lot of questions that I will ask when I get the initial referral. Individuals who are deemed disabled and on SSDI because they have enough work credits or work quarters become eligible for Medicare typically 2 years after that eligibility is approved. However, there are certain circumstances, certain diagnoses where you do get Medicare earlier. But usually with my young adults, we are not applying for SSDI because they don't have enough work credits. So typically when I'm working with a young adult, what we're looking at is SSI, Supplemental Security Income. This is needs-based. Social Security doesn't need to see any work credits or work history at all. If you become eligible for SSI, you automatically get Medicaid. This year in 2023, the federal SSI amount is $914 a month. And then in the state of Wisconsin, there is $83.78 monthly. So again, that is if an individual who is eligible for SSI is paying their fair share of expenses. So even as a young adult, if you're living with your parents, they can still charge rent. They can still have you pay for your own cell phone bill. They can have you purchase your own food. And Social Security asks these questions because they want to know if this young adult is paying their fair share of expenses in that home. And if so, they get the larger amount of $914. Sometimes parents aren't comfortable charging their child rent or room and board rates. And then Social Security says that's fine, but then that individual is considered living in the home of another, and they get the smaller amount of federal SSI of $609.33 for this year. However, if you qualify for $1 of federal SSI, you automatically get that $83.78 for state SSI. That is not prorated at all. And just to point out, Medicaid is, like I said, it pays for insurance. It's your insurance. However, Medicare is also an insurance program in the state. Medicare, though, is much different than Medicaid. As far as if you have Medicare, it typically only pays 80% of your medical bills, and you have to either see if you qualify for Medicaid or a supplement or an Advantage plan. It gets very complicated. And at the ADRC, we can explain all of that and go into great detail to help you understand that. But typically for tonight, because we're talking about transition and young adults, usually I'm helping them apply for SSI, and they automatically get the Medicaid that's attached with it to help pay their medical bills if they have to go to the doctor and things like that. We also, in Wisconsin, have what's called SSIE, which is Supplemental Security Income Exceptional. And one of the information and assistance social workers, such as Jim or one of the other social worker INAs here at the ADRC, must fill out some additional forms, but if the young adult needs more than 40 hours a month of care in home, then they may qualify for an additional $95.99 a month from SSI from the state. So again, it is good to make sure when you're talking transition and talking to Jim, for example, if your child has exceptional needs, a lot of extra hours in home of care, to discuss that with him so that after they work with me and are deemed disabled by Social Security, eligible for SSI, I can make sure that I can do the referral back to Jim to do that additional paperwork to assess for the e-supplement.
Okay, thank you, Quinn. I'm going to jump back in and talk about the third area of transition that we'll talk about tonight, and that's basically looking at the publicly funded long-term care programs. So this slide kind of shows kind of the flow chart of what that looks like and how that referral is made and how we get somebody enrolled. So essentially, the long-term care programs are designed to help people maintain their independence in the community. Those programs could fund anything from transportation, maybe a job coach, could pay for somebody to be taught life skills, could even pay for an adult family home or group home if needed. So really the long-term care programs are programs designed to help people maintain their independence in the community. Now, in order to be eligible for a long-term care program, we're going to kind of look at this flow chart. The first thing that somebody would need to do is call the ADRC. Again, we're going back to that 17 years, 6 months. We can start the workup for the long-term care programs at that time. So when you would call the ADRC, we'll sit down with you. We'll talk about what your goals and outcomes are. And if receiving services and needing services in the community is something that you're interested in, then we will go ahead and pursue that. So when we start looking at the long-term care programs, we look at two different things. One is functional eligibility, and the other is financial eligibility. All of Wisconsin's long-term care programs are funded through Medicaid. So when Quinn was talking about Medicaid before and looking at Badger Care, SSI, Medicaid, whatever, these programs are funded by Medicaid. So that child or that young adult would need to be eligible. Now, here in Wisconsin, if a young adult is on Katie Beckett and that's in force, most times that Katie Beckett will carry that child through age 19. By that time, we'll already have them into a program, and then hopefully their SSI had come through with the Medicaid, then that would be there for the rest of their life. However, there are times when young adults are not on a Medicaid program like Katie Beckett. Usually in those times, if that young adult would want services right at 18, most likely what we'd be looking at is that child applying for Badger Care and being on their own case. So that doesn't happen until age 18, but at 18, then the entity that approves Badger Care then would disregard parental income and only look at the income of that young adult. So that's another way that a young adult could get Medicaid at age 18 to be in a long-term care program. So once we figure out that young adult will have a Medicaid source at 18, the other thing that we look at is functional eligibility. Now, to determine functional eligibility, we do something called the State Long-Term Care Functional Screen. What that screen looks at are the things that young adult can do and the things that young adult needs some assistance with. Based on how they do on that screen determines their eligibility or their functional eligibility to be in a long-term care program. So in this situation, let's say that young adult has a Medicaid source, we know that, and the ADRC has done that long-term care functional screen and determined that yes, they are indeed functionally eligible. The next thing that we do then is sit down and talk with them about all the options that they have within the long-term care programs. For example, and we'll get into these a little bit, but here in Sauk County, we essentially have 6 different agencies that young adult can pick one of those to provide their long-term care services for them. However, The agencies that they have to pick from varies from county to county. Some counties have more, some counties have less. It all depends. Then once we get them once they determine what program they'd like and what agency they'd like to go with, then we make referrals to that agency that they picked. At that point, the ADRC is pretty much done with the transition role. So that's, and then with that being said, the person has been referred to an agency, and then that agency then will work with that individual to determine what services they'll receive, the frequency, and who those services are going to be through. Okay, so we'll go on to the next slide, and we'll talk about the different types of programs that somebody can pick from. So as I said, here in Sauk County, we have 6 different agencies, but really statewide, there are only 4 different types of programs. Those programs are Family Care, Partnership, PACE, and IRIS. So when we're talking that, and again, we would get to this point once we've determined that young adult meets both financial and functional eligibility. So we're going to talk just briefly about the different types of programs that young adult can pick from. We'll go in order that they're listed here on the slide. The first program is called Family Care. With Family Care, you get a care manager and a nurse. Together, they work with you and anybody else that you want on your team to determine what services they're going to pay for. Okay, so parents can be on that, teachers. I've seen clergy, doctors be on, that team as well. So, but really what happens is a team is developed that includes the person, any other people that person wants on their team, and then a care manager and nurse. Together, they put together a care plan that will entail all of the services that agency is going to pay for. With Family Care, they do have universal Medicaid, meaning that they can go to any hospital, any doctor, any pharmacy they want to go to. They have that Medicaid that's universal, that they can see any provider in most cases that they would want to do. And the reason I say that is because there is a difference in the next program that we're going to be talking about. That next program is called Partnership. Partnership looks very much like Family Care with a couple differences. With Partnership, you get a nurse and a care manager, just like you do with Family Care. The services that Family Care and Partnership can pay for is exactly the same. The difference, though, comes in the medical side of things. In Partnership, you also get medical case management. So that nurse that's assigned to you will basically do medical case management, and then you also have a care manager that's going to go do services case management. So with Partnership, really what happens is they put those two things together, and that's why they call it Partnership. Now with Partnership, though, the Medicaid is a little bit different. Because you are receiving essentially medical case management, you have to be within the agency's HMO or provider network to receive any of your Medicaid card covered medical services. So there is a little bit of a limit there as to who you can see for your medical care. The other side, though, is that you do get that medical case management. So that's where those two programs differ. The next program that we have on here is called PACE. I have to be honest, Sauk County does not have PACE. I believe Milwaukee County is the only county in the state that does offer PACE. So I can't really speak to that program. So moving on to the next one, IRIS. IRIS is available in all 72 counties here in Wisconsin. With IRIS, looks quite a bit different than Family Care and Partnership. In that, with IRIS, you don't get a care manager or a nurse. You, the participant, is actually the care manager. You determine what services you're going to receive and the frequency of those services. Now, the state does not give you a blank check and say, go buy all the services you want. What happens is when the ADRC does that long-term care functional screen, all the cares that are identified on that screen, a dollar amount is assigned to those internally in the computer program. And then essentially then based on how you scored on that screen determines how big your IRIS budget will be and how much money that you have to work with each month. And then you would have to live within your budget for that IRIS program. So IRIS, as I said, does not give you a case manager. However, they do give you somebody called a consultant. That consultant will let you know how much your budget is. and then in turn help you set up a care plan to help spend that money each month on the cares and services that you need. Once that care plan is ready to go, then IRIS enrolls you into their program. With Family Care in Partnership, the ADRC will actually take care of enrollment. So it's a little bit different as far as enrollment goes. Now, going back to IRIS, the Medicaid is universal. Again, you can go to any hospital, any doctor you want to go to, essentially, in most cases. So it's very much like the Family Care Medicaid. The only program where Medicaid is limited is in the partnership program, meaning that you would have to remain in network for whatever agency you pick. Okay, and I think at that point, we have reached the end of our conversation tonight. As I said, every county in the state of Wisconsin does have a aging and disability resource center. So there is a link here that you can use to go ahead and look up your county and then find out where your ADRC is located.
Jim, this is Liz. I have a question for you.
Sure, absolutely.
If someone chooses partnership or family care or IRIS, and it maybe isn't enough support or it's too much support, can they change?
Absolutely. And that really becomes the ADRC role after somebody is enrolled into a program. People can, as long as they maintain their Medicaid and their functional eligibility, people can switch programs as often as they'd like. All they would have to do is contact the ADRC. They don't have to give us a reason. People can change any time that they want to for any reason. And that becomes the ADRC's role down the road. Good question. Oh, you're on mute, Liz.
Sorry, I muted you there, Liz. I was getting some feedback between your speaker and Jim. Do you have other questions, or do you want to move on into your part of the presentation?
I just had one more quick question for Jim. Does it take a long time, or is it a long process to switch from one to a different program?
No, it really can happen within a day. I mean, people can determine when they want to switch. That's up to them. So if we get a call and somebody does want to switch, we set up a time to meet with them. We go over all of the options that are available to that person, and we call that enrollment counseling. At that point, they determine what program they want to go into and when they want to do it. So they could say, I want this to happen tomorrow. And we can make that happen. So sometimes people like to wait, to the beginning of the next month. That's fine too. We're really on, that person's clock as to when they want to have the switch happen.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm ready to go into mine if you don't mind, Tim.
All right, absolutely. So thank you. Jim and Quinn will be hanging out, and we'll be able to offer, they didn't know they would be, but they're going to be hanging out so that they can answer questions at the end. But we did want to talk a little bit about how this interacts with Sauk Prairie School District and what Liz does to help her students out.
You can go on to the next slide. Thank you. I did put the link to the Sauk County ADRC on this slide, just in case people wanted to check it out. And I wanted to, you can go to the next slide. I wanted to talk a little bit about how Sauk Prairie School District helps with the process. So typically what I do as the transition coordinator is I assist the families in the referral process at the age of 17 and a half. And then I do help coordinate with any outside agencies with whom you might be collaborating. I help provide any needed documentation of disability to the ADRC as long as you sign a release for me to do that. I can also scan any needed documents that you might have and send them to Jim with a signed release as well. Sometimes people have medical reports or neuropsych reports that they need to share as they're looking at the functional screen. And so I can scan those for you and send them if that would help. Also, I can provide a space for you at the school to meet if you would prefer that. And I can connect you with Jim and participate in any meetings that you would like me to attend. I've taken some families and students up to meet. I can help in whatever way possible to make sure that those appointments happen. Next slide. So if you are working with outside agencies like Lutheran Social Services or Comprehensive Community Services or Sauk County Human Services. Some of those providers will collaborate with the school district and do the referral to the ADRC when the student turns 17 and a half. So if you are working with any of those agencies or others, I'm happy to do the referral myself, but sometimes those agencies will do it for you. And if you do have any questions, please do reach out to me and I will try to find the answers the best I can. Jim and Quinn have been very responsive to us. When we've had questions, they get back to me very quickly. So it's been very seamless for us in Sauk Prairie. Next slide. I did, oops, it kind of went out of sync there, but I did put the phone numbers for each of the area the Aging and Disability Resource Centers in our area. We work with Sauk County, Columbia County, and Dane County. Those are typically the counties that our school district pulls from. Next slide. So I did want to say we do have more Transition Talk Tuesdays coming up. We have next week will be guardianship and supported decision making. And then we have healthcare for people with disabilities, and then working while on Social Security. And then the last one will be Sauk Prairie Beyond 18 programs and employment. Next slide. I included the links to sign up if you would like to, if you haven't already. And then there's my contact information there. And I really want to thank our interpreters and Tim and Quinn and Jim for coming tonight. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to either type in the chat or unmute and ask any questions that you might have.
Because of the excellence of all of our presenters, we have plenty of time for questions. So please do feel free to, if you unmute, we will be able to see that and we'll know who is talking. Raise your hand if you know how to do that with the feature, with the reactions button at the bottom of your screen. Or again, put it in the chat and I will be more than happy to repeat the question to the presenters. I do have a question for Jim and Quinn, as I know that 17 and a half is that time when you can start working with the family. The families may hear about the ADRC before their child turns 17 and a half, and they're going to call you and say, okay, why do I need to understand about the ADRC? Are you going to hang up the phone and tell them to call back at 17 years, 6 months?
No, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
No. In fact, what I will do is I will, and we do get calls like that, and it might be that the child just turned 17. So we're close, So I will, talk about those 3 areas that we focus on, and let that parent know, this is what we kind of look at when we talk about transition, because a lot of times, the fear of the unknown is pretty powerful. And, the more that we can educate, even if they were a little bit early, the more we can educate, the better we can, work with that transition, maybe put some minds at ease and, knowing that we're, that they'll have some support, in the short time that will, help their child transition into the adult world, I think is important. So absolutely would totally have that conversation.
And I just want to point out that typically Jim will do a referral at 17 years, 6 months. But then what happens is that I will follow up with the family. I will explain that typically we can't apply until the month after the child turns 18. But I explain the process and what to expect and how long the process takes, because applying for disability is taking at this point close to a year for a decision to be made. It's a very long process. It used to be a little shorter, but what happens typically when someone works with me and we're applying for disability is they come to my office and we complete the online disability application as well as a paper SSI application. There are releases signed, and I send it all on to the Social Security Administration in Portage, which is the office I work with. But then what happens is the Social Security Administration contracts with the state of Wisconsin Disability Determination Bureau, and they're located in Madison, and the case goes there and they request medical records, IEP, school records, things like that, and make a medical decision. Once a medical decision is made on whether it's the SSDI or the SSI, it goes back then to the Portage Social Security office for them to determine which program and whether or not they have to do some additional follow-up phone calls. But I'll be honest with you, it's not assigned right away once it goes to the Disability Determination Bureau. It can take several months before it's assigned, and it's a long process. So I'm always there also for the individual and the parents, especially if they have recently become guardians or are legal decision makers. I explain to them what is happening, and we'll stay with them during that year to help them with all the paperwork that may be coming to them over time.
Quinn, this is Liz. I have a question about that. If somebody is receiving Social Security as a child and then they turn 18, does the Social Security go away while they're waiting for the determination from the state?
Typically not, if they're going to remain in school between the ages of 18 and 19. There's some paperwork, I'm sure you've seen the paperwork in the past, Liz, that the school has to fill out to show that that individual is remaining in school. And so there's some paperwork. That's why when I get the paperwork, a referral from Jim, for example, at 17 years, 6 months, one of my first questions are, they going to remain in school past the age of 18 in a transition program, for example. And then I make sure that we get connected with Social Security to get that paperwork.
Other questions that you might have, and I do realize that I don't think everybody on the call is in Sauk. So just to be clear, is that the other counties do have ADRCs, they do have disability benefit specialists, they do have information specialists. Not as good as Jim and Quinn, but they do have people in those roles. So you can call your local ADRC and get the same sort of assistance. Any other questions, comments? This is where I put the link in the chat to the follow-up survey. That's, of course, if I would remember to ever get the follow-up survey done. So, yeah. One moment, please. We would encourage you to go ahead and, before you leave us tonight, to click out and take our super duper short survey. This just helps us know how we're doing and helps us plan for future events. With that, anything else, Liz, or can we go ahead and sign off for the night?
I think we can go ahead and sign off for the night. Thank you to everyone who's here. Appreciate it. And this presentation will be up soon once I send the final slides to Tim, and we'll get it up on the website so that you can share or watch it again.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for being here.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.